Good evening, everybody. John Stewart, Cueball Carmichael, another edition. Thursday nights, our new time of Truthbusters. Kind of taking a solemn tone here today, not trying to be so Johnny Stewart DJ from the 70s. We are on our second part of our four-part series of John F. Kennedy and the JFK assassination. Last week, I thought, was a really, really great show with a lot of information, some of it not really readily available on the internet or TV programs. We talked about who in the government would possibly want John F. Kennedy out of the way or assassinated. And we covered things like, of course, Lyndon Johnson, who many, many people, including E. Howard Hunt on his deathbed, the famous CIA operative from the Nixon era, on his deathbed, who said, I was a bench warmer the day of the JFK assassination for a thing that was called the Big Event, and it was spearheaded and initiated by none other than LBJ. We also talked about J. Edgar Hoover. We talked about the Warren Commission, Earl Warren, who was fired from the CIA by JFK and then actually heads up the commission to investigate his assassination. Lots of really interesting things that we talked about in our first part. And tonight we are on our second part series. Before I get into that and tell you our topic tonight, I also wanted to say, and I did not discuss this with my co-host, Cueball Carmichael, our pilot of this free-floating stream of consciousness plane in the conspiratorial 50,000 feet altitude of the sky. But I thought, Q, we always try and reach out and get as much credibility with our listeners and viewers. I think if we have time today, I know we're going to have time next week. Next week is going to be Cuba, Russia. Who were they involved? But I think we're going to have time next week. I would like to, I have compiled a list. Q, I'm encouraging you next week, all this week and next week, to compile a list of actual misnomers about the JFK assassination. Things that actually did happen that we think, oh, that was a myth, and that's why the government's lying to us. For example, Lee Harvey Oswald, the famous picture in the backyard. Everybody said, oh, Oliver Stone showed how the CIA cut out a picture and the shadow wasn't right. Mrs. Oswald, Lee Harvey's wife, said, I took the picture. So I would like to spend 10, 15 minutes next week adding to our credibility to say, no, this did happen. That really did happen. That's bullshit. And this is why. So I really hope you join us next week, because we're going to dispel a lot of myths about JFK that, I think could you talk about this for a couple minutes before we get into it? I think I was thinking about this today, driving back from Wisconsin to my house, that, one of our jobs here as broadcasters is, educating our viewers so that they can go to the 4th of July the Labor Day picnic this weekend, or at work, or the water cooler, or with their friends, and they can speak more intelligently on matters all conspiratorial or whatnot. And do you feel that should be and is an integral part of our show? I mean, like completely educating people, making them more aware, good and bad? You?
They were technology. And we covered in 6 parts, and all we did really simply the level of technology, or the lack of those types of tools and equipment, and modern day professionals in stonemason and construction looking at these amazing carvings and cities and things like this, and saying to themselves, hey, we would have a tough time doing this today with all of today's modern tools and technology. So I think that really set us apart as a broadcast that gives information, lets people disseminate it they want to, and come up to the hypothesis that they want to have.
Yeah, it's so true. I think that also. I think when someone talks about any of the subjects we have talked about, and with our research and compiling other research that we do on a weekly basis, I think that this is almost like a marketing strategy. If you didn't care about the listeners, which is the only reason why I know Cueball, the only reason why we're doing this is because we want to illuminate people and educate them but I think if you were just a scumbag and just wanted listeners and viewers, that making someone more confident in their argument, or when they go to their uncle at a Thanksgiving, or they're talking to their coworkers, about aliens and whatnot, and you give them a word track or a line of thinking that I think we have on so many things. You bringing up a piece of stone that was the size of 2 Georgian houses in Washington, D.C. I mean, stuff like that. I think it bonds the viewers and listeners to us, and I'm really happy for that. I really am, and I encourage anybody out there that feels otherwise, get a hold of us and let us know, if there's anything else we can do to to make your experience with us more enjoyable and more educational, because that is the reason why we do that. So I wanted to get off my chest. I wanted to hear your opinion on that, Q, and I appreciate it. So we are on part 2, Q, of our JFK assassination. And tonight is very dear to my heart because I live in Chicago, JFK and the mob. And with the declassification of so many of the documents in 2017, thanks to our president, Donald Trump, we found a lot of documents that linked JFK with Sam Giancana and the Chicago mob, and we are going to talk about that today. BQ, I wanted to give our listeners an even more historic breakdown of the Kennedy family, and most importantly, Joe Kennedy, John F. Kennedy's father. And this is the genesis of this Kennedy mob connection started. Well-known fact through documents, even testimony of mob figures, and even some people of the JFK family, that Joe Kennedy was one of his many things he was involved in was bootlegging back in the 20s and during Prohibition, and did it in Boston and in New York, and under the I guess the wing or the badge of Frank Costello, New York mobster. And that is really the genesis of how Joe Kennedy and the Kennedys got cozy into bed with the mob, New York back then, and then later on with Chicago. Do you have any thoughts on, here is this educated Joe Kennedy, and he was an investment banker, and we find out he's a bootlegger. I mean, that, you're smart enough. You're a cop. You've been around the block. You get in bed with the mob. You ain't getting out of that bed. I'm not saying dead, but you ain't you don't walk away and say, "Oh, that was a nice 6-month run. See you later."
Yeah, nobody does that. When you're involved in the mob at the level in which Joe Kennedy was, look, you may not be Italian, you may not be a made man, but we know that a lot of the mob had a lot of their enforcers were of the Irish American community.
True.
They just were English American, Scottish American, Irish American. That was a lot of their enforcers. And so they had great connections, and we know the list of the mob connection with Kennedy, and that's why I think that all of these names were thrown in. And when we get to that part, a lot of the names that were thrown in with Joe Kennedy ended up dying after JFK's assassination, which I find sort of ironic.
Yeah, I will get to that later. We will get to that later in the program. If you think that just witnesses and co-conspirators died after Kennedy was assassinated, no. When the government started investigating the mob in 74, 75, Operation Mongoose, which most people think was turned around on Kennedy, mobsters started disappearing and dying en masse. So we'll talk about that. Q, great point. This is why we pay you the big bucks. Great point about this New York mob using Irish and Scottish thugs. That's well documented. So if you say, oh, what do you mean the mob only deals with Italians? And no, that's mob has historically dealt with Jewish people from Jewish heritage, Latino, Black, and of course Irish and Scottish descent too. So here we go, and Joe Kennedy's oldest son dies in a bombing mission in World War II, and I think that was Joe Jr. And so it was Joe Kennedy's ambition to be president of the United States. He knew that he had so many fingers in the underworld pie, so to speak, and I think Joe Kennedy was kind of an egomaniac. I mean, even that, and a narcissist. I think even a person like him said, that ain't never going to happen. He does become ambassador to England, which is, other than, I can't think of a higher post than that. Even from the ambassador to France, the UN was not invented in before World War II. So, I guess the League of Nations was, so to speak. But anyways, Joe Kennedy is appointed ambassador of England, which was a huge position. His son dies in World War II, and I guess he looks to JFK to be, the next in line for possibly being president. JFK's a sickly, spindly, kind of a bookworm. Joe Kennedy and Ethel basically ignored him while he was sick. And if you can imagine that, being in a boarding school, I think John F. Kennedy, I thought he had a scarlet fever at one point. He had Addison's disease, and he's in this bed in boarding school and doesn't really get written to by his parents. They don't visit him. That had to have some kind of psychological consequences. Irregardless, JFK, because of PT 109, that blows up, he saves a bunch of sailors. He becomes a legit war hero, and Joe Kennedy starts eyeing him for his political ambitions. Any thoughts on JFK, pre-Congress, pre-U.S. Senator, pre-presidency?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think Joseph Kennedy Jr. was being groomed to be the all-American war hero, come back, run for office, be elected, work his way, become a representation of the people, just like JFK did. But I think everything went awry, and I think you're right. I think Joseph and Ethel eggs in one basket with Joseph Kennedy Jr. until he died. And then I think at the same time, I think first something made his family. JFK had obviously enlisted and has a chance to swim his life or save the shipmates. And all of a sudden, he becomes the legit war hero. And suddenly, the apple of Joe and Ethel Kennedy's eye. It's kind of ironic. And you think about, some of the callbacks we hear of JFK. I mean, look, we know today that with children of today, last generation, every childhood, that's the reason. So why not take this and, maybe perfections were based on childhood. I'm today, why couldn't it be true, 70 years ago, 60 years ago? I definitely think you would have grown up with pictures of abandonment from both parents. I think that was clear and evident from his childhood. And it was just
unfortunate event that for him and unfortunate for his family and his brother. But it's kind of ironic how the shift in the golden child happened so smoothly and such a smooth transition that Kennedy never missed a beat with this.
No.
We know that capitalists are opportunists, so there you go.
Yeah. Correction. I said this, and I have COVID, pro wrestling, and semi-pro football had. Rose Kennedy is the matriarch of the Kennedy family, not Ethel. Sorry. That's my bad. But hey, I'm the one. This is like the third time I've caught one of my mistakes on a podcast. So this is that's our credibility. Anyways, yeah, Rose Kennedy. Okay, Joe and Rose Kennedy. Anyways, so it's going to be a close election. He another misnomer of John F. Kennedy that his daddy bought him a seat in Congress. There's a lot of testimony that he actually worked his ass off. And I'm sorry, as senator, worked his ass off to become senator and did a lot of, just grassroots campaigning and, standing on the back of a pickup truck and campaigning to factory workers and stuff like that. So we hats off to him. I mean, Daddy didn't hand him absolutely everything. He goes to run for president against one of his old cronies in Congress, Richard Nixon. Tricky Dick. And it's close. It's the summer of 1960. It looks like maybe Nixon could pull this out. They have the infamous televised debate, the first presidential televised debate ever, where Nixon refused to wear makeup. He was sweating. He had a notorious sweaty upper lip. Here's John F. Kennedy, even though it was black and white TV, golden boy, tan, just spot on. Reneges on some Cuban intelligence that Richard Nixon could not go toe-to-toe with him at, because Richard Nixon was vice president, or had been vice president, and he would have been breaking, national security secrets. So Kennedy one-ups him on some Cuba information and propaganda. But it's still close. And Joe Kennedy's like, I don't know if we're going to pull this out. And, like every, crafty business person, Joe Kennedy feels that if they win Illinois, they could take the election, and calls up a mob connection, the head of the Chicago mob, Sam Giancana. And lo and behold, Cook County, which is Chicago, Illinois, basically, delivers the vote. And you've heard, folks, the term used, vote early, vote often. That is a direct term used from Cook County politics, which I ran in office from. One day I'll have to tell you stories about the Democratic machine I ran as a Republican, a suicide mission. And he enlists the Chicago mob, and the mob delivers Cook County, therefore delivering the presidency of the United States in 1960. And even back then, Q, it was close. There was no landslide over Nixon. I mean, it was one of the closest elections in presidential history. And from my research, and even, you don't live in Chicago and not know some, I don't know how to put this, because, I've been involved in politics. I'm going to put this as lightly as I can, but truthfully as I can. You can't live in Chicago for 53 years, be involved in politics, be in the car business, be Italian, and not know someone who knows someone who is affiliated with the mob, loosely associated with the mob. And for my whole life, I overheard stories, and which were also backed up by FBI documents and in well-researched manuscripts and books, that it was happy time. The Kennedys were in the White House, And the mob especially the Chicago mob, was saying to themselves, we got a guy in the White House now. And this was going to be, the golden era again of the mob. They have somebody in the White House, their man that they put there, JFK. But Q, as we want to take us from here, Robert F. Kennedy is appointed Attorney General, and things don't quite go the way the mob had planned.
Just want
Q?
to expound a little bit, a tiny on Joe Kennedy really quick. The Great Depression, the stock market crash in 1929 was devastating to most people. But it's ironic that Joe Kennedy actually credit in part for causing the crash of the stock market.
Correct.
Because the way that he his stock, the Depression 1929, Kennedy's worth $4 million. It's equivalent to $59.6 million today. By 1935, in the end of the Depression, his wealth had increased to $160 million, which is equal to $3.36 billion today. So while everybody in America lost everything, Joe Kennedy, his income and his assets rose an incredible 1,000+%. That's insane. That's how much stroke he had in the market. So now moving forward, Kennedy's really shook up the United States because Bobby Kennedy was a guy who was known that was going to eliminate corruption. And JFK was a guy who was known for going to break up the good old boy network in Washington. So imagine both of these people coming into their prospective powers in the early 1960s. That is a recipe for disaster for the entire political regime, for all the mafia guys that were tied up with these guys, because Robert F. Kennedy was going to out those guys too, and it was just going to be a massive cleaning house of Washington, D.C. between these brothers.
Yeah, I think the mob, like many people, thought, geez, his dad and Frank Costello were bootleggers together. We got him in office. I mean, literally, he knows we got him in office. I didn't even know if they were expecting any favors. Only the simple fact of, just let us operate our industry, which was, racketeering in all forms and vice in all forms. And they got just the opposite of it. I mean, all of the reading that I've done the past 20, 25 years, there wasn't a, special favors being procured or asked about for JFK. Although something I'll get into, Judith Exner, who was the mistress of both John F. Kennedy and Sam Giancana, very important to know. I think she's the crucial link in all of this. She was a courier between them of information and messages and whatnot. But the mob just wanted to be able to run their organization. And right from the get-go, Bobby Kennedy basically said, no, we're going after the mob. And I can't, can you, was Bobby, I know Chris, I know his son. I actually ran against him for Congress for a month until he dropped out. And I respect him. But was Bobby Kennedy just like stupid, ignorant, an ego out of control? He must have known the mob got his brother in office, and now you're going after the mob, making you really, in my opinion, for the underworld, target number one. I mean, what could have possibly been Bobby Kennedy's rationale for doing this when we know that JFK was really a get along, go along guy? How could his brother be this stupid?
I think look what he did. on by first off, nobody's in those days in that era ever success to tell about it. Just did it. I mean, most of these guys, if you met the mafia, they had so much power and so much stroke and so many people involved that there was just no. And they made an example out of him.
Yeah. Yeah. I for the life of me, and I've not read anybody that has made sense of why Robert Kennedy did what he did, and more importantly, why John F. Kennedy let him do that. I mean, John F. Kennedy wasn't an idiot. He had to have known that this was going to light a fire that, you know, that was going to be hard to put out. I mean, you get the mob's help to put you in the White House, and now you're going to start investigating the mob. And he goes right after Jimmy Hoffa, and so bad that he actually ends up incarcerating Hoffa. And Hoffa, you know, with the infamous, you know, I'm going to get that son of a bitch, Bobby. I mean, their hatred was legendary. And Hoffa, of course, you know, tangentially related with the mob and Teamsters pension funds, and that's how we built Vegas, or that's how the mob built Vegas, was through Hoffa and the Teamsters pension fund. I mean, it was all, and you know, so you're pissing off the mob, you're pissing off the head of the Teamsters union. But one thing that I read, Q, that I think is important for our viewers was a low-level mafia guy said on a documentary years ago, you don't kill the person who's causing you all the trouble. You kill, you know, someone as closely associated to him. You don't kill the dog. You kill a family member. You know, you don't kill a guy that owes you $1 million. You threaten to kill his wife or his children. And in this respect, there's no way they could have killed JFK. I'm sorry. There's no way they could have killed Bobby Kennedy, who was their number one nemesis. The only way, and if they would have killed Bobby Kennedy, you're killing the head law enforcement officer in the country. That you're talking about World War III of federal troops in the army against the mob. The mob would have been destroyed, and the mob knew that. And the mob knew the only way to shut Bobby Kennedy up was impossible to kill him. Believe it or not, it was more heat to kill Bobby Kennedy than the president.
Sure.
Because killing his brother shuts Bobby Kennedy up, and they killed his brother dies. I'm not saying that they killed him. JFK dies, and Bobby Kennedy is done. I mean, you know, for all intents and purposes, his investigations and congressional courtroom hearings just grind to a halt. You know, he becomes almost a puppet of Lyndon Johnson and J. Edgar Hoover. So, you know, this interesting thing that the mob is known for, not really killing the money man or they kill someone around him, certainly is very indicative of the JFK assassination, because JFK, for all intents and purposes, really didn't go after the mob himself. I mean, he had his deal with Castro and with Khrushchev in the Cuban Missile Crisis and getting this economy back, and taking on the Washington. That was an eloquent point you made a while back, that, you know, JFK took on the Washington insiders. He wasn't about the mob. So I find it funny that he dies and the mob is no longer under any kind of scrutiny. So that folks is something to remember. You know, so I also wanted to bring in Q about Sinatra. And, you know, it's been said a million times that Frank Sinatra just did anything he could to calm down Giancana and the Chicago mob. against JFK, and and to some degree for a year or two, basically kind of held the mob at bay with a whip and a chair against the irk against the Kennedy family and the Kennedy administration, but that did not last long, and it is funny that Johnny Roselli, and I'm getting down to this, Johnny Roselli, who was a captain in the Chicago mob, told many people, and even told us in loose testimony to federal agents that the men that the CIA had him recruit to assassinate Castro, and I'm reading this, turned around and assassinated JFK. So, number one, why would Johnny Roselli, a mob guy looking to be out of the limelight and in public scrutiny, why would you make a comment like that? That sounds almost too truthful. Oliver Stone carries this, and Jim Mars, who wrote Crossfire, the famous JFK assassination book, also says this, and even Bobby Kennedy, when he calls Lyndon Johnson, this is on tape, folks, he says, "Why did your guys do this to my brother?" So who is those guys? Are these the guys that Johnny Roselli recruited with the understanding of the CIA to kill Castro, and because of the Bay of Pigs fiasco and the mob being under such intense scrutiny, did it get turned on JFK? What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts have always been this. I mean, how much? How could there be a better way to shift the heat off an internal assassination of U.S. government groups, people, or factions are responsible for this, but they make it so easy to blame on the mafia. And then slowly all of these mob leaders start to die under pretty mysterious circumstances, some of them even for mob members. It reeked of an internal job being covered up by, hey, let's blame it on the easy marks, the mafia, and what Bobby's doing, and it grinds to a halt. So it appears that it was the mob, because Bobby quit his investigation, everything got put on hold, and they went back to business as normal. If I'm an insider doing this job, that's exactly how I want it to look to people. So I'm still going with the side of it was internally done for a variety of reasons. Number one was full disclosure and transparency to the American people about everything.
Q, I'm going to write this down. Hold on. Because I want a record of this, because we're going to go over this. Okay, go ahead. Your number one reason. Go. Shoot. I'm your secretary.
My number one is, look, internal hit. Okay? Easily done. Blamed on the mafia. Super easy to do. And then the leaders of said from Chicago to New York start out even under mysterious circumstances for mob bosses, right?
Right.
Witnesses are intimidated. Witnesses are dismissed. The independent witnesses and people never get talked to, or they start to die mysteriously. Look, if I'm the government and I want to have an internal reason to eliminate the president of the United States, I've got the perfect patsy in the mafia, and ultimately it leads to the slow, painful death of organized crime in New York and Chicago, or at least to a screeching halt. I think it was an internal job blamed on the easy marks, the mafia.
Q, we've always given we've always given like the analogies, and I think I number one, I think you're right on the money. It's like, you and I are working at a car dealership, and we're managers, and we don't like the general manager, but he's okay. But the assistant general manager is an asshole. and he's questioning every decision that Cueball manager Cueball and used car manager Jon Stewart are doing. He's making our lives miserable. The general manager won't do anything because it's his brother. And, we tell the porters in the back, take out the general manager because everyone knows we hate the assistant general manager. And by taking out the general manager, your life's going to be easier because look how tough he's been on you porters every day. He makes you wash the cars every day. He makes you do this. And that, folks, that's not a silly analogy. I think it's actually a easily understood analogy of, hey, who are the guys being affected the most? The mob. Are they willing to do something like this? Yes. Who hates them the most? The mob. We hate them too. Let them do it. They've done it all the time. Folks, the CIA, this is fact. Freedom of information request. The CIA used the mob on many assassinations in the 40s, 50s, and the 60s. That is fact. So, you're right. The internal government, those that want him assassinated, tell the mafia, and here's the biggest thing, Q. You and I, as the managers, work to cover up the fact that the porters killed the general manager. We hide this. We rip up internal memos. Maybe we fire a couple of secretaries that know, that we were talking to the porters. You and I could do a lot of cover up as managers of our quote unquote assassination car dealership. And I think that's what the internal government was for. Look at the Warren Commission, the whitewash of the Warren Commission, the FBI not investigating witnesses that wanted to come forward. Nobody investigated the Grassy Hill. Nothing. The Ruby connection, the Chicago Mafia. That all, Oswald couldn't have done that. You're right, Q. That had to be the internal government.
I believe with that, guys. Look, we got to go to a commercial and pay some bills, but stick with us. And myself, Cueball Carmichael, and the Jon Stewart will be right back to give you more information.
And we are back. Truthbusters Live, Thursday night edition, covering the JFK assassination. We are on part 2, talking about the Chicago mob and the mob's connection, if any, which we are trying to prove today, to the JFK assassination. We talked about how Joseph Kennedy, the patriarch of the Kennedy family, was a bootlegger with Frank Costello. That put him in cadence with the mafia, how the Chicago mafia, this is just fact, stole the election in Cook County, which prompted and pole vaulted John F. Kennedy into the White House. John F. Kennedy makes his brother Robert F. Kennedy the Attorney General, and immediately the Kennedy administration starts going after and investigating the organization that, quite frankly, put them into the White House, the mob and the mob associates, Jimmy Hoffa and the Chicago, New York, New Orleans, and Kansas City, and Milwaukee, and Las Vegas mob. And how this directly started to, I guess, Q, the point I'm trying to make with the mob is that Robert F. Kennedy and John F. Kennedy got the ear of Lyndon Johnson. Lyndon Johnson's in trouble. He knows he's going to, folks, this is fact. He knows he's going to jail when Time Magazine or Life Magazine publishes this expose of the murder, the lies. I mean, it's Shawshank Redemption, the ending, the warden of Shawshank reading the newspaper. That was Lyndon Johnson's fate. That is proven beyond a doubt. So Lyndon's got to make a move. Lyndon knows he's got and again, I'm going back shows. We're trying to get caught up forward. Lyndon Johnson knows Kennedy doesn't have a friend in Washington. Cueball Carmichael, our host, has covered that extensively. He wanted to take out the old Washington Boy network. So here's Lyndon. He needs to be president to make this investigation go away. He knows that Kennedy doesn't have a friend in Washington. He knows that the Joint Chiefs are on his side, don't like Kennedy. With the Bay of Pigs, the Joint Chiefs and the military despise Kennedy with Kennedy's fumbling of the Bay of Pigs. Then Kennedy doesn't want to go into Vietnam. He wants to pull out the advisors, 1,000 advisors, as early as December of '62, which infuriated the military. And then he further infuriates intelligence in Washington when he sends out the directive memo to the Army that he wanted to end the CIA, splintered it into the wind in 1,000 pieces. So he has no friend in Washington. He has pissed off the military. He has completely put a bullseye in his back with Washington intelligence, the CIA. J. Edgar Hoover, no friend of the Kennedys, especially Robert Kennedy. Robert Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson despise each other. And now Lyndon Johnson is looking at this and saying, can I really, again, I am speculating. This show neither endorses Jon Stewart or Cueball Carmichael's opinions or theories. I am speculating that Lyndon, and Q, I would like your input on this. Lyndon is saying to himself, everyone hates him. Who's going to kill him? I know, and I know that the CIA, and I know Lyndon would know this, that they use the CIA for hits. Let's take he probably talks to somebody he can trust in the military, who they can trust in an army, in intelligence, and quite frankly, somebody in intelligence in Washington, national intelligence in Washington says, why don't we just get the guys who went after Castro that we got to go over after Castro and turn it on Kennedy? And I'm sure Lyndon Johnson said, well, who ran that? And CIA or intelligence would say, well, the Chicago mob, and Johnny Roselli ran that. Okay, that's the muscle. That's the hit. Now Lyndon Johnson knows he's got the mob he can trust. He's not going to go after him. Lyndon Johnson takes office. He doesn't go after the mob. The mob is free, is given a free, absolute reign. All of the investigations are stopped. J. Edgar Hoover, folks, Jesus Christmas, do you think we're not on the trail? J. Edgar Hoover states publicly, there is no mob. There is no mob, folks. What do you want me to investigate? There is no mob. So this was, again, I know it's crazy to believe, but kings are killed. Lyndon Johnson finding all of the support, which is if you're going to assassinate a leader, you're going to need a tremendous amount of support, I would think. And then again, finding the muscle who would do it, the mob. Q, your theory or your comments on that.
Well, now you have to look at the people that despise Kennedy the most. And there was a lot of them.
Everybody.
I think of Jack Nicholson's character. There is an admiral, general, whatever you want to call it, United States military, who fought in World War II. They're a legitimate war hero. They're high-ranking military officials. They're in Washington. They're getting massive payoffs, working with senators and congressmen, with defense contractors. They're taking tons of money. They feel the nation owes them for their debt of service to America during World War II. And how dare you question me type military officers, exactly like Jack Nicholson played. And if too good that we're being right along with the mafia guys, right along with Johnson and his administration. So you had all these negative things. Like John said, there wasn't a person in Washington that liked what JFK was doing. Who hates him bad to kill him? Well, later when we get into this in part 3 and part 4, when we actually tell you how many shots were fired, I'm going to tell you which group of people pulled the trigger on shot. I'm not convinced that this is so much more. I explained to you about the government. Was the government in on it? Absolutely. Was the mob in on it? Absolutely. Was the United States military in on it? Absolutely. Were the local national law enforcement in on it? Yep. Absolutely. But we're going to go with that part 3 and part 4. What we'd like to ask you to do, while we have your attention, is to please run over to YouTube, put in Triple T Radio, one word, space live. That's Triple T Radio, one word, space live on YouTube. Find our channel, hit like, hit subscribe, check out Truthbusters every Thursday night at 8 o'clock. Check out Triple T Radio with Nick and I every Tuesday night at 8 o'clock. I guarantee you the shows are just, if nothing else, guys, you got to admit, they're riddled with enthusiasm. And if you're excited about what you're doing, how can you guys listening to what we're doing? I mean, this is stuff that we are all passionate about. So join the crazy train, in the words of the great Ozzy Osbourne, and head on over Triple T Radio, one word, space live, LIVE, and sign up to the channel. And John, that's my thoughts. I think they all had a hand in it, to be honest with you, because who's ever going to squeal if everybody's involved?
Yeah, when you were talking about, I can't even imagine being Lyndon Johnson. He must have, leading up to the assassination, and again, another mark against Lyndon Johnson. His mistress has went on 3 documentaries saying that he came out of a meeting the night before the JFK assassination while they were in Dallas, and he said, "Those son of a bitch and Kennedys aren't going to embarrass me ever again anymore." But Lyndon Johnson had to have been just a little bit perplexed or like shaking his head. The military's not against me. The military intelligence isn't against me. I really don't have anybody close to me that's against me doing this. This president has pissed off the oil men. Folks, if you don't go to war, if you go to war, you need oil, lots of it. If you don't go to war, you don't need any extra oil. Think about how much diesel fuel, gasoline, jet fuel, kerosene, all derivatives of oil, was used in the Vietnam War. I dare to say trillions of gallons of oil were used, whether it be lubrication for machinery or in the actual fuel for machinery. All of the defense contractors in Texas, Bell Helicopters, nearly bankrupt before we go into Vietnam, and the helicopter now is used in Indochina, and voila, Bell Helicopters Rescue, but so many defense contractors in Texas and in the South. What I'm trying to say is this, is that JFK and his brother took maybe the most perfect route to the heart of so many evil and corrupt individuals that it almost blows your mind. You going from pissing off your vice president, the military, intelligence, oilmen in Texas, the military-industrial complex, which I think is scarier than the CIA or the mob times 50. I mean, he pissed off the military-industrial complex, and that is what Eisenhower during his speech before he left office warned America of that. And this organization, the military-industrial complex, were the puppet masters of the military and intelligence, and really in the White House too. And he pissed them off by not wanting to go to war in Vietnam. And I just think basically it was a cue. In my opinion, I visually see like just this gauntlet of everyone just stepping aside and letting the assassins through and helping to facilitate them. Tell me if anybody has anything where somebody didn't want John F. Kennedy out of the way. I don't see it.
Yeah, everybody in any form of power definitely wanted him out of the way. And people have to understand what a powerful human being Lyndon Johnson was before he was ever elected as any type of high-ranking. I mean, he's a oil millionaire, Texas ranch millionaire. I mean, this guy ends up in Congress in 1937 or something like that. He was an old crony of 30 years almost by this point. I mean, he was totally one of those guys that his domestic policy really was the beginning of the one global government. If you look at it, it is great society legislation, which we'll go into another time because I go on a tangent about that. Yeah. He's the guy that created a controlled society. Poverty, he was supposed to be helping people with poverty. What he did is he created an environment for people in poverty in which to live, survive, nothing more, and function, where we could keep an eye on them. That was his government policy, believe it or not, Michelle. So this guy, look, anybody that has that moral compass and those high ethics, probably go underneath an ant's belly. If it comes down to it, here's a guy who was used to his own, didn't take no, was a billionaire, was about to go down. His only out was to what? Knock somebody off, get him out of the way. Done it before. Ain't no big deal.
Totally done it before. Right. Oh, folks, Lyndon Johnson was an animal. There's many people that have said and speculated, right or wrong, arguably, maybe the most powerful legislative-wise, the most powerful senator to ever occupy Congress. I mean, just absolutely. It was F you, you're doing it my way. F you, you're voting for this. This guy made Mayor Daley of Chicago look like, milquetoast. One book described him as an animal. He would he would go to the bathroom in front of his aides while they were having a meeting. I mean, he was just, he had a well-known killer on the payroll. Thoughts that he actually murdered his own sister, who was going to testify against him. Folks, read it. I mean, these are well-researched things that are in books and highly speculated and researched. Lyndon Johnson, thinking of assassinating and getting someone out of the way, folks. Take it from Cueball and I. That's the least craziest theory of the JFK assassination. Trust me, trust us on that. The fact that Lyndon Johnson would never, don't even start that line. He would have. He would have. Q, I want to go to one last thing. I know we are going to, next week will be some of the misnomers and truths that actually did happen during the JFK assassination, Castro and Russia, their possible involvement. And then the last part 4, will be the day of. And Cueball and I will bring you, minute by minute of exactly from shot to car ride to the hospital and everything. But without jumping forward, Q, we got about 4 minutes left. James Files did not come out and say that he was the grassy knoll shooter. In '93, Zach Sheldon, an FBI agent, approached Jimmy Files, who was in Joliet Statesville Correctional Facility in Illinois, and said, look, I have this under good authority. You are the grassy knoll shooter. I'm going to recant Jimmy Files. We're going to probably talk about him next. We're definitely going to talk about him in the fourth part of our series, the day of the assassination. But Jimmy Files says very, very specifically, and I know I got 3 minutes left. Look, I was a low-level thug and a hitman for the Chicago mob. Charles Nicoletti recruited and under the tutelage, Johnny Roselli and myself, and went to Dallas 2 days before. He talks about the restaurants and the motel he stayed at. He said how Lee Harvey Oswald showed him around Dallas. They picked up Chuck Nicoletti from the airport. They drove down to Daley Plaza. Jimmy Files was the backup. If Case Kennedy they were looking for a headshot. And if they did not have a headshot, Jimmy Files was to be the final shooter. And Roselli and Nicoletti, Jimmy Files said, I think you should be in the Deltex building, which they're now showing that there were shots fired from that building. Jimmy Files says he used a Remington Fireball handgun / rifle. He had a mercury round. You've seen the x-rays where there's all these little dots of mercury in JFK's brain. Nobody can explain how it is. He simply says, I saw them make the left turn down Elm. I was counting the shots. I had not seen a headshot, so I figured they were all misses. I was instructed to make sure that he did not leave that area alive. I was also instructed not to harm Jacqueline Kennedy. And as I thought it was in the last field of vision, I took the shot. And 67 people ran up towards the grassy knoll. He said he took the gun apart. He put it in his briefcase. He turned his jacket around. He put on a hat and simply walked away. You can see a black figure carrying something in a picture walking away from Daley Plaza. We'll get more into that. Q, I just wanted to say one thing. Jimmy Files did say one thing. He said that Chuck Nicoletti told Roselli, look, the guys in Washington want to abort. And Johnny Roselli said, quote, fuck it. The old man wants this done. We're going. So the old man being Sam Giancana. So, you know, so maybe Lyndon had some cold feet. I would have had cold feet too. However, the Chicago mob decided to do it.
Yeah, and I don't know, and there's some names to look up. Charles Nicoletti was such a powerful figure. You hear about Sam Giancana, you hear about Johnny Roselli, but you don't hear about him. But look at him, and he was such a powerful organization. You can see if there's a guy who was going to handpick a couple people to be on this team, he was definitely Charles Nicoletti was going to be the guy who was getting the job done for sure. Yeah. So we'll leave you there for this week. John, great show, buddy. I hope the fans were informed. Listen, we're going to do part 3 next week, part 4 the following week. We'd like some ideas for whether you want to hear us talk about Bigfoot, a conspiracy theory, whatever you want to hear us to talk about in the show. Put it in the comments. We won't think it's too crazy. After all, it's a couple of pro wrestlers hanging around together, having a good time, and talking about conspiracy theories and a lot. We'll put on next. All right. Well, look, it's Cueball Carmichael for my host and co-host and brother, Johnny Stewart. for another edition of Thursday Night Truthbusters, 8 p.m. live here on Facebook. Please go over to YouTube and hit Triple T Radio, one word, space live. That's Triple T Radio, one word, space live. And check us out on YouTube. Please hit like and subscribe. You can find all there. I want to thank you again for sticking with us on another crazy Thursday Night Truthbusters ride. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you back in the same seat Tuesday night this coming week for Dick and I to do 90s tag teams on Triple T Radio Tuesday night at 8 o'clock. We had a blast last week. We had over 500 people view it. We got a lot of comments, guys. We appreciate it. Come back this Tuesday night at 8 o'clock. We're going to do 90s tag teams. It's going to be a great time. Please join us then. And again, this is Cueball Jon for Jon Stewart and Truthbusters Thursday Night Edition. Thanks for stopping by, folks. We'll see you next week.